Hi, my name is Paige Bartley. I'm a senior analyst with 451 Research, which is part of S&P Global Market Intelligence. And today I'm joined by Lothar Schubert, who is a senior director in Hitachi Vantara's Lumada ecosystem. And today what we're going to be discussing is the role of data ops and data management in the context of IoT. Thanks for joining us, Lothar.
Great to be here, Paige.
So I think one of the things you need to address before you can really discuss data management and data ops in the context of IoT or even industrial IoT is simply what is the definition of data ops. And today at 451 Research, our functioning sort of definition of this term is a more agile application of data management practices to sort of further drive those data-driven outcomes. Now, that may not seem very concise, but what it's really looking to do is sort of unite the view and understanding of data across the organization, across silos and repositories that perhaps may have been disparate over time or historically. Now, Lothar, do you have any thoughts on how that has sort of manifested with your customers or what you've seen?
The way we look at it here at Hitachi, it's ultimately what customers care is about the outcomes, right? Be it in manufacturing for predictive maintenance, be it in supply chain management for route optimization, be it in financial services to deploy new products such as usage-based insurance. Now, what have those all in common? It's about IoT, yes. It is also about analytics and AI increasingly. And that leads us right to data ops because, well, data, of course, is critical for AI. And for data management, here you need collaboration between many stakeholders, be it the IT, be it the business stakeholders such as services or sales, and then the so-called OT side, let's say production management as well. They all need to collaborate with trusted and shared data. And DataOps, of course, DataOps helps with the collaboration and the automation which is needed there. One more final point here, specifically for IoT. IoT often works in mission-critical environments. For example, at Hitachi, we started to incorporate AI technology directly into controller systems, right? So they have physical actuators there that they're moving, and there's of course a big worker safety aspect. From that perspective, AI needs to be trusted, it needs to be explainable, it needs to be auditable, which comes very much back to your point, Paige, that you made earlier about governance and data lineage as well. So, since you talk about edge right now, I would love to get your point, Paige, on what's going on in edge computing.
I think one of the main things to think about when you're looking at sort of an ecosystem where there's data being processed at the edge is when you have more processing locations for data, things are more distributed, and that entire provenance of the data lifecycle becomes that much more important. So when you're computing at the edge, often that data is destined to be processed elsewhere. So data doesn't just live exclusively at the edge. There's an entire life cycle that it goes through, often being passed between processing locations. And this is especially true in industrial environments where you may have everything from heavy machinery all the way to higher level analytics applications on the enterprise analysis side of things. And all of that data needs to be able to fluidly interconnect, communicate. You need to be able to have lineage, understand where data is coming from and where it's going. So from a data ops perspective, a data management perspective, it's really important to have that cohesive understanding of data from its initiation, whether that be at the edge or elsewhere, all the way over to how that data is being used in terms of driving insight. So I think that's one of the key things to look at is how cohesive is that environment in terms of your data management, and that's really important.
That is so true, Paige, and that I'm sure will resonate very much with our customers as well. For example, right, we operate mining trucks, for example, which are essentially autonomous vehicles, right? They have like hundreds of sensors on those trucks, and so you have data which is collected at the edge, it's processed at the edge, but it doesn't stay there. It eventually will find its way into, let's say, a data center, and then it might reach out for model training into Azure or AWS or Google or something like that, and then it needs to take the data back from there for inference, again back to the edge computing, because in mining, well, there might not be great bandwidth, right? And you need to process directly on the edge. Now, this now means also there's a change happening, there needs a change to be happening for edge devices. And we're seeing that happening right now. What traditionally has been on the edge, there's still lots of historians out there, which are essentially time series database and analytic systems, and they have their purpose, of course. But the challenge with this, it's pretty old technology often. It often runs on all the versions of Microsoft Windows, right? So that creates issues. It's compliance and security issues. It's a cost issues. It's a lack of innovation in this area. So we see now technologies which have been tried and tested in the IT world being taken now into those IoT edge environments. Things such as microservices architectures, Kubernetes on containers to drive quick updates there as well, app stores for edge to deploy like industry-specific analytics, packaged analytics directly into the edge. So that's the changes we see happening. And then Paige, to your point, of course, connecting easily the edge to the data center and to the cloud. Now, Paige, since we're talking about technologies right now, there is the notion of IoT platform, which is debated in the industry, and what roles platforms should play there.
I think that one of the potential pitfalls in considering a technology platform is thinking of it as just an IoT platform or just a platform for a certain type of data. And I think our discussion has made it very clear that this is a very interconnected ecosystem of data, and depending on the various data types you have, they all interact. So you really need a platform that can be supportive of all of the different data types. And in doing so, compatibility is absolutely a number one consideration. So if you're looking at the entire data ecosystem within your organization, there really needs to be compatibility with all of the different data types. And in an industrial setting, this is even more challenging in some cases, because you have heavy machinery, you have certain data types that may be proprietary or more difficult to deal with, and compatibility with those data types is absolutely going to be mission critical. Now, also looking at general architecture, hybrid and multi-cloud is the norm now. So in considering architecture, those aren't really nice to haves. It's just sort of the general status that most organizations are dealing with in terms of how they manage their data. So those are key things that need to be considered in terms of containers and cloud-friendly architecture. And finally, one of the things you need to think about is, who are your workers within the organization, and how do you make them more efficient and productive? So I think there's sort of a tax on any sort of technology that hampers that end user productivity. So I think we're beyond the days in which data security or data management practices can slow down your average consumers of data within an organization. So today, there's sort of this dual emphasis on not only compatibility and data source support, but also how do you make those average workers that depend on that data productive in their daily roles. And Lothar, would you say that's something that you've seen?
Very much so, Paige. I mean, you touched on really quite a few really important points there. The notion of hybrid environments, right? About edge and private cloud on premises and public cloud compute. That is critical for any IoT platform. The data management, the central role of data in there that we're talking about here, of course. So the ability to incorporate different data types, video, time series, document, ERP data, and process and governance data with catalog functions and whatnot, that is critical as well. Of course, you need to have the reliability, mission criticality, security, and what you would expect from a platform. Also one note, and you touched on this page as well, it's not a monolithic platform that customers want. They have enough platforms, right? So for example, Hitachi's Lumada is taking an approach with a very modular approach. Sure, there's different components which can be deployed in composition, but also can be adjusted to the respective customer needs. And ultimately, what customers are looking for is the outcomes. And that's where platforms certainly can help a lot to accelerate time to market, to lower the risk and cost of projects, and ultimately to deliver better results for the business at a faster time.
So there's some practical considerations in looking at an IoT data platform or a data platform more broadly. And I think one of the number one things to remember is that if you look at it in the scope of a single data type, you're really looking at it in a myopic fashion. So we tend to think of IoT data as a discrete thing, but it's not really. As we discussed earlier, it interacts with all of the other data types in the organization, especially when you're trying to drive more advanced insight. So looking at a data platform for IoT, you need to think about just compatibility. You know, is it compatible with other data sources in your operations? There are a lot of considerations in terms of compatibility, and generally speaking, the broader that compatibility is, the better in terms of your overall data efforts. Now, a second thing to consider is going to be hybrid and cloud native architecture. So these are not really nice to have features, they're essentially table stakes now. So in our research at 451, we're seeing that most organizations either strategically or sort of incidentally have adopted hybrid and or multi-cloud architecture in their data management efforts. So looking at an IoT platform today that can support IoT data, you need to have that cloud compatibility and preferably multi-cloud functionality. And finally, one of the things to think about is how is this driving productivity within the organization? So as more individuals within that business become consumers of data, so your average workers within the organization are getting their hands on the data and looking at it and using it to drive insight, how do you support them in their productivity without slowing them down with burdensome restrictions and processes? There's a fine line and a balance that needs to be made in terms of things like compliance and privacy regulations, but also you don't want to frustrate those business users. So any sort of platform that's being examined or considered needs to be able to demonstrate that it can support those worker goals. Now, Lothar, with Hitachi Vantara, are you seeing some of the same things and trends with your customers?
The cloud or the hybrid cloud aspects you talked about, very critical for our customers, be able to run on the edge, in the data center, in any of the public clouds. So that is critical, certainly. Also the data management aspect, which is really the focus of our conversation today, right? IoT, many different data types. There's video data increasingly a lot. There's time series data, there are documents, there are ERP records. All of this data needs to be integrated, it needs to be managed, it needs to be governed as well in a secure fashion. Data catalogs, for example, play a key role in there as well. And the other aspect about platforms I want to mention, and here I talk, for example, about Hitachi's Lumada, which is one of those platform options. We found a monolithic platform is not what customers are looking for. They will say, well, we already have lots of platforms in our organization. I don't need yet another platform just for IoT. So having a composable or modular approach is really critical, right? Which allows you to take those pieces that you want, the connectivity, the data management aspects, the pre-built industry-specific algorithms you want to pull in, and mesh this together with your ecosystem really to deliver the solutions that customers are looking for. The benefit often, which a more packaged platform is, it has those pieces which fit together. It also buys you into an ecosystem, which is critical in Page. You touched on that as well. Ultimately, whether build yourself or take more off-the-shelf offerings there, it is all about platforms enabling faster time to market at lower risk and lower cost.
Lothar, I think that completely makes sense in terms of what we're seeing in our data management research and looking at how organizations are trying to really align these objectives in terms of managing their data and driving more benefit from it. Lothar, do you have any further suggestions on how we might be able to help people understand this topic a little bit more?
Yeah, at Hitachi Vantara, we worked with 451 on a business impact brief on that topic. So if anybody interested, just connect with me on LinkedIn and I will send it over.
Thanks, Lothar, for being able to discuss this today on this very interesting topic. And again, thank you to everyone who's able to join today.